All right, we are just about ready to start. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to another fabulous edition of Kabbalah and Coffee. And folks, this is our Kosher for Passover edition, and I want to say this. Y'all are in for a treat today because we have an amazing discussion to explore together. Okay. Let's welcome everybody here. Give me a second. Okay. So I am now muting everybody. This is just for the sake of reducing the background noise for the benefit of everybody. If at any point you want to ask a question or share a comment or add to the discussion, please, you can unmute yourself and you are good to go. So let's welcome everybody. Number one, Joanne. Live from Austin, Texas. Welcome. Joy, welcome. Welcome. Joy, welcome. Maybe Max is here also. Marnine, welcome. Matt, welcome. I saw you before briefly walking through the forest. Ah, there you go. Maybe it's not a forest, but I see the trees. I see the mat from the trees. Oh, there we go. David, good morning. David, Adam, can't hear audio. Okay. All right. Well, David is here also. David, I hope you can hear us. Adam, it's good to see you. Julie, it's great to have you on. Erica, it's great to have you here. And Maritza, it's great to have you here. Okay. So, welcome. Happy Passover. Hope your Passover has been going well. Hope you had a nice Seder or two. Hope your matzah was nice and crunchy and tasted better than the box that it's in, because that's always a benefit. By the way, to answer the question, yes, I got a haircut. So as you can see, but it's still me. It's still me with a haircut. It happens a few times a year. Okay, now or more. So welcome to Kabbalah and Coffee. It is great to see you. It's great to have these opportunities to connect, even with the world looking a little bit different than it might have looked a few months ago for us. It's great to be here together and study. Okay, a few things that I want to mention. So number one, I sent out an email. I sent out an email right at the start of the holiday. Some of you, I think, got it. An email asking if you are able to help support In-Town Jewish Academy, to help support In-Town Jewish Academy. We have, thank God, been able to operate even under these very difficult circumstances for all of us. And the reality is that we still have our operational costs and overhead costs. And so I'm asking if anybody can help with that. We have a campaign this month, the Passover campaign. If you can help, please give. It's going to a good cause, and it's directly helping our community and continuing Torah teaching in our community, both in Atlanta as well as beyond, as you can see. So again, if you can help, please reach out to me or just go to intownjewishacademy.org/donate to help. Okay, so on to today's class. And also I should mention, this is another housekeeping note, and that is that you may have seen questions, or you may have seen items about the security of Zoom, and people calling that into question. Zoom has released some updates over the last few days that have made it even more secure. In many instances, well, at this point, they're making passwords being default to get into rooms. This is an old room. It's like 2 weeks old or 3 weeks old, so therefore we don't have a password by default. But we have a waiting room, and a waiting room is I'm admitting the people that I know, and I have the power to bounce out people if they ask the wrong question. I'm kidding, not if they ask the wrong question. If anything goes awry, we can always bounce that out. Also, I've disabled the ability for people to share their own screens, so thus mitigating a lot of the concerns about the Zoom bombing that's been going on. I don't think it's going to be much of an issue. It shouldn't be an issue in these classes. Just so you know, some people have forwarded me some items about Zoom and security, so know that I'm very well aware of it, and we've taken steps, including the waiting room, to address that. Okay, so on to today's show, on to today's class. Kabbalah and Coffee, today's title is Self-Awareness, and I want to share with you regarding the origins of self-awareness And the way we're going to do this is I will share with you, this is being culled from 3,000 years of Kabbalah, 3,000 years of Jewish mysticism, and 5,780 years of Jewish recorded human history. And the evolution of self-awareness that we're going to explore today is going to take place in three parts, focused on three main characters: Adam, Noah, and Abraham. So this is a tale of self-awareness, or the origins of self-awareness, told in three acts. Act 1, Adam. Act 2, Noah. Act 3, Abraham. So let's explore. Adam and Eve had the good life. They were in paradise. Not euphemistically paradise. They were literally in paradise. The Torah calls it Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. And life was going well for a few hours. The Torah tells us that they were created on the sixth day of creation. Day 1 was Sunday. Day 6 was Friday. They were created Friday right around midday. Had they slid into Shabbat without any hiccups, without any glitches, the world would have been permanently in paradise state. However, they were given one commandment, one prohibition: not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's it. They had one obligation, or one prohibition. That's it. And we know the story, right? The story is that they couldn't hold themselves back. If you tell somebody you can have whatever you want except for that thing, guess what they're really going to want? It's basic human psychology, right? You tell somebody you could look anywhere in the room except don't look in that direction. What's the first thing they want to do? Is look in that direction. And you're probably wondering which direction in your room I'm speaking about right now even. So the point is that human beings have this very interesting way of following the forbidden fruit, so to speak, or whatever. And that's what happened with Adam and Eve. And so our sages tell us that if they had waited a few hours, life would have been perfect, Shabbat would have arrived, and everything would have been cool. I think it's very important to talk now for a moment before I continue about what exactly was the forbidden fruit. What was the Eitz Hada'at Tov V'Ra? What was this tree of knowledge of good and evil? So, you can unmute yourself, or we can play Pictionary, or you can mime out what is the traditional fruit that has been associated with Adam and Eve's sin. Feel free to unmute yourselves. Traditional fruit.
People say the apple.
The apple, right. Yes, apple. I'm getting some chats as well. Yes, it's the apple. I will tell you that I don't know if this is a strange marketing ploy by the state of Washington or by other apple growers. Golden delicious, exactly. But according to Jewish wisdom, according to our tradition, it had nothing to do with an apple. Apples were completely innocent of this entire episode, and it was quite the episode. The Talmud discusses the fruit in question. What was the Eitz Hada'at Tov V'Ra? What was on that tree of knowledge of good and evil? And the Talmud gives various opinions. One says it was wheat. It wasn't even a tree. And I know what you're wondering. I guess the rabbis of the Talmud didn't know what a tree was if they said that the tree was wheat. Don't worry, they knew what a tree was. They knew what wheat was. They were very well versed, all puns intended, and they base it off of various verses that refer to wheat. It was a fig. Why? Because in the entire narrative of Adam and Eve, the only type of food item that's mentioned specifically by name is the fig. Somebody unmute yourselves and tell me where in the story of Adam and Eve and the sin are figs mentioned. Someone help me out here in the chat, or unmute yourself. Where do we see figs in the
leaf where they covered themselves?
Yes, exactly. After the sin, right? And they realize, whoops, we don't have clothing, right? Awkward. So then God fashions they fashion for themselves garments made out of the fig leaves. Okay, fine. So yes, Adam is texting me as well. Fig leaf, yes. Okay, now that's the second opinion of the Talmud. Others say the pomegranate. Pomegranate. Another opinion, and this is the one that we're going to focus on today because it literally explains so much in life and so much in the Torah itself. And that is, opinion number 4, is that the tree of knowledge of good and evil was actually a grapevine. A grapevine. And Adam and Eve were meant to take those grapes, squeeze them into grape juice / quick fermenting wine, and recite Kiddush over it Friday night. Are you with me on this? They were meant to use that grape, that wine, to recite the Kiddush, the ceremonial cup of blessing, for the onset of Shabbat that would take place a mere few hours later. But as they were told that they couldn't have it, and as there was a serpent nearby doing its very serpenty, slithery thing, we know what happens. The end of the rest of the story is that Adam and Eve eat from the forbidden fruit. They're banished from the Garden of Eden. The human being is, the language of the Torah is cursed. I don't know, cursed, it sounds a little bit harsh, but the human being is told that anything worth having is going to be now the product of a struggle. The world is not going to respond intuitively to our needs. Life itself is going to be the product of difficulty, and that's where we're at. We're literally in that space, post sin, outside the Garden of Eden, and the goal is, of course, to transform our world back into that garden-like state, a state of transparency. Okay, so now we've reviewed the story. But what really happened? What really happened? And by the way, I need to tell you that there is a course, the next 6-week course that we had, and maybe even have planned to start in the beginning of the month of May 5th and May 7th, is called Secrets of the Bible. And it is a course that is a walk-off Grand Slam 7th game World Series winner. It's an unbelievable course, this upcoming course. Now, with the world looking the way it does, right now I'm working on, thinking, do we delay the start of the course and do it in person, or do we do it online? My inclination is to do it online, but I'm waiting for JLI headquarters out of New York, out of Brooklyn, to help me make that call. But that's another point. The reason why I mention that course is because if at any point today you're enjoying taking a deeper look at classic biblical stories, you should know that this upcoming course, Secrets of the Bible, is all about that. 6 weeks, classic biblical stories, completely, I was going to say revamped, but it's not revamped. It's completely re-understood, completely retold from a mystical perspective. The stories are blown up with a dozen questions. Every story is ripped apart with questions, and then we go to the mystical dimension where we reconstruct the story and everything falls into place, and then we draw incredible, pertinent, relevant 2020 life lessons. Anyway, that's about that course. Today I'm going to do a little bit similar with the tales that I'm sharing right now. So that's, in general, the story of Adam and Eve and the sin in the Garden of Eden, eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So what really happened? They ate from the fruit. That's the story, right? But what really happened? Why did they eat? And what changed from before to after? What actually changed? So, the Kabbalah tells us that Adam and Eve, before the sin, did not possess self-awareness. If you got the email, which I sent last night, due to the holiday, I didn't send it out before Wednesday or on Wednesday, and so I sent it out last night. My apologies for the late notice, but I'm glad that you're all on here today. So the topic is today's self-awareness, so we're going to jump into that right now. Adam and Eve, before the sin, did not have self-awareness. They had God awareness, or they were aware of their space and their mission. They weren't thinking about themselves. They weren't thinking about what do I know and what do I feel. They were completely lost, if you will, in the moment. Athletes will speak about a state of being in the zone. Yeah, raise your hand if you've heard of that word. Athletes or artists or what, being in the zone, where everything else fades away, and the only thing in one's consciousness and one's awareness is the moment right in front of them. Everything else, the crowd, the other players on the field or on the court, everything else fades away, and it's only me, right? If I'm the athlete, locked into this moment, and that's it. Everything else is gone, is absent. It's being in the zone. We might have experienced this maybe when listening to a piece of music, where you get so caught up in the beauty of the music that everything else, all of the stimuli around us disappears, and the only thing we're paying attention to, the only state that we're in, is being connected with that piece of music. It could be many experiences where we get completely locked into it to the exclusion of any other stimuli. One of the amazing things about being in the zone, so to speak, is that not only are we unaware of any other stimuli outside, but we're also unaware in that moment of how we feel. We're not aware. When a person is in the zone, they're not aware of how they feel in the moment. They're just fully present in the moment. Are you with me on that distinction?
Yes.
You're lost in the moment, completely present in the moment, and not thinking about how you are feeling about or thinking about in the moment. Because the moment that happens is the moment that, guess what? You're no longer in the moment. Right? The moment you think about, wow, I'm in the moment, is the moment you're out of the moment. It's the observer. Either you're the participant or you're the observer. When you're the participant and fully engaged as the participant, you're completely oblivious to everything else around that experience. You're just having the experience. I'll give you an example. Our sages tell us that when it comes to Torah study, we're meant to be fiercely open when studying Torah, and then after studying, be fiercely analytical. And it doesn't only mean after the entire lesson necessarily, but it means that openness is openness, and being inquisitive is being inquisitive, and it's not the same, it's not simultaneous necessarily. Why? Because if when I'm trying to learn, I'm thinking about, do I understand it? How do I understand it? Etc. If I'm too much in my head, then what I'm doing is observing the learning experience and not doing what? Not actually learning. So the learning, the openness, is a reality, is a state unto itself. And then the processing is another state. When it comes to processing, now I can ask, I can interject my own self-awareness and say, how do I understand it? Do I understand it? What does this mean? How do I apply it? And all of those questions. For those familiar with the Kabbalistic chart, with the constellation of Sfirot, so to speak, Chachma is more the pure open experience, and Bina is more of the self-aware and analytical experience. So it's divided into two realities. We have the Chachma reality and we have the Bina reality. The Chachma reality is pure openness, being dissolved in the moment. That's why, as many of you know, we've discussed it, I think even in this text that we're studying now currently, the Chachma in the Hebrew can be reformatted to form the word Koach Ma, which is the power of what? And if that doesn't make any sense, okay, hold on for a second. Don't you think about it? Not making sense. Be open to what I'm about to say. See what I did there? So, what is Chachma? What is Koach Ma? Koach Ma means the power of the question, the power of being open. The Ma, what or why or how, the power of being open to the new idea, the new possibilities. That's what Chachma is. It's openness. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot in Ethics of Our Father says, Ezehu Chacham, who is wise? Halomed Mikol Adam, one who learns from every person. Wisdom is synonymous with openness. It's not being self-aware. That's Bina. That's analysis. That's being analytical. When we're being analytical, then we're thinking about thinking. But Chachma is openness, absorbing, pure absorption. Bina is thinking about thinking. Bina is processing the processing. How am I processing it? It's asking the question. It's a very meta process. Chachma is pure. So let's get back to the point. There are moments that we're in the zone. Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
So before you referred to Chachma as learning and then Bina as analysis, but learning, wouldn't you think about, or I think about learning as the combination of both. It's one, that openness, and then the learning occurs when then you can make sense of it for yourself.
Yeah.
So
yeah. What? Yeah. Go ahead.
Components of learning.
Say it again.
Wouldn't they be two aspects of learning rather than one versus the other?
Yes. When I said learning, what I meant was you're learning new information or you're absorbing new information that you didn't have prior. So Chachma is very much a process of an openness to something new. It's kind of like we've given the example before. It's about a lightning. You're in a dark alley. You don't know what's going on. And there's a lightning bolt in the sky, flash in the sky, and everything illuminates, and you can see all your environs. You can see everything around you for a moment, and then fades once again to dark. You can't see anything. So that's the example of Chachma. It's that lightning flash, the Barak HaMavrik. It's that flashing bolt, that lightning bolt that illuminates everything for a moment. And that's why I said learning in the sense of discovery. It's a discovery mode, right? It's discovery before the processing. So it's like open discovery, and then Chachma, and then Bina is now analyzing it. I agree with you. In totality, we would call that learning. Learning encompasses the entire spectrum. But specifically, Chachma is that open phase, and Bina is more of the meta analytical state. Now, so getting back to the notion of being in the zone and situational awareness. So when a person is in the zone, they're completely locked into that moment, completely locked into that time and space. And we've all had that experience, whether or not we're a professional athlete or even an amateur athlete. We've all had moments in which we were so present. We were so present in that space, whatever that space was, that we didn't even notice anything else around us. And when we're in that moment, typically, if we're oblivious to what's going on around us, we're usually also oblivious to what's going on inside of us, because we're completely focused on whatever it is that we're focused on, a task at hand, and a thing that we're doing. We're completely locked in, not thinking about, oh wow, look how locked in I am. Because if you think that, then you're not locked in. The moment you're thinking, wow, look how focused I am on this thing, is the moment that you've already distracted yourself by thinking about how focused you are. Getting back to Adam and Eve. The Kabbalists teach us that Adam and Eve before the sin, the natural state, the default state of the human being was such that Adam and Eve were completely locked in to their spiritual environment to the point they didn't see anything else. They didn't see themselves. They weren't even aware of the fact that they were so locked in. How do I know this? How do I know that there was no self-awareness whatsoever? You tell me. Someone, it's open to everybody. How do we know that there was absolutely no situation, there was no awareness, self-awareness on the part of Adam and Eve before the sin? What does the Torah tell us about their state before the sin?
Because they were naked and unashamed.
That's right. They weren't wearing clothes, and they weren't ashamed. And that seems like a very odd detail to tell. The Torah is not telling us all the details. Torah doesn't tell all the details about every character and every story, every dialogue. It only tells us the ones that are informative, that are life lessons. And it makes a point, the Torah does, to tell us that right before the sin, they were not wearing clothes and they were not ashamed. And immediately following the sin, they realized that they were not wearing clothes and they were ashamed. And it's clearly a contrast before and after. The Torah is telling us that before they had no self-awareness. They were in the moment. It's like children, young children. They don't know about clothing or not clothing. It's whatever. They're in the bath, they're out of the bath, that's it. There they are, through the house, running. You're trying to, wrangle them to get clothing, and that's it. There's no inhibition. Because they're not self-aware. They're not what we would call self-conscious. Like, what's going to be if somebody's completely a different way, completely in the moment. Children in general, and I've mentioned this before at Kabbalah and Coffee sessions, children in general have an easier time being in the zone, being in the moment, to the complete exclusion of all other realities typically than adults. As adults, we're more in our heads. And as adults, we're thinking about, what we're doing and how we're doing it and how others see us doing it and how we see ourselves doing it. We kind of, we're all oftentimes stuck in our heads. Whereas when we're younger, children are in the moment. Who's more likely to just abandon everything else and just completely, play in that moment and not realize what time it is, other responsibility, no other awareness? Children. It's actually a gift, and it's the gift that was given to Adam and Eve by default. Now, Joanne.
I have a question. Is there any explanation about why shame became associated with that self-awareness?
Yeah. Shame in Kabbalah is the gap between who we are and where we know we ought to be. That's the definition of shame. Guilt is feeling regret over the past. That's something else. Shame is not something about the past. It's about a present reality. It's feeling the gap between where we are and where we know we ought to be.
So did they feel shame because they were naked, or they felt shame because they did something they weren't supposed to? I'm curious.
They were now aware that their body was not a pure tool in the divine plan. They had stepped out of that space, which is where we're going with this whole thing. They stepped out of that space of the zone, of the spiritual zone, and they stepped into their own reality, disconnected from purpose, from God's purpose. And at that moment, their bodies became separate, if you will, from purpose. And that's what induced shame.
I see.
Not necessarily what we might think about the body that induces shame, but also that. But also in general, The body itself has fallen short. The body itself is now not a pure conduit. If you look at the body as a glove and the soul as the hand, right? That's a really great analogy to understand the way things are intended to be. Right? The body is meant to be a glove to facilitate what the soul needs to do on this earth. Or if you want to look at it another way, a spacesuit. Right? You take a human being and you launch him into outer space. Good luck. Yeah, Marcia, go ahead.
Excuse me, Rabbi. Could you please just repeat your definition one more time?
Of shame? Of definition of shame? Yes? Okay. Shame is the gap between where we are and where we know we ought to be. On every different level. Right? So whether it's behavior, whatever it is, right? So it's the gap between, it's feeling the gap between where we are and where we know we should be. That's what shame is. But again, getting back to let's give another analogy of the spacesuit. You launch a human being into outer space, and they can't survive. They can't survive in that without the oxygen. The body is not attuned in this form to survive in that space. So you put on a spacesuit, and the spacesuit allows the astronaut, allows the human being to do what they need to do in outer space. It's the same thing with the soul. God launches a soul into this world. Well, guess what? A soul can't survive in this world. A soul on its own, it's like a human being in space. It can't survive. So God puts the soul into a spacesuit. Welcome to the body. That's what the body is. But the wild thing about the human body, about the way things are right now, is that the body has its own agenda. The design is like a spacesuit. Imagine if an astronaut was in outer space. I mean, this is like HAL, right? Space Odyssey. Space Odyssey? What's the 2000? Yeah. Okay. Right. So imagine the astronaut's in outer space, and he's like, doing a moonwalk. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm like some sort of slow motion. This is like a robot dance. Whatever. He's doing some sort of moonwalk, and suddenly the spacesuit decides we're not doing that. Sorry, we're gonna go lie down right now. Has its own agenda, totally derailing what the astronaut wants to do. Welcome to the world of the soul. It's kind of frustrating to be a soul, right? Welcome to the world. The soul comes down. It has a mission. It has its book. It has its manual. It's called the Torah, the mitzvot. It's got its agenda. Everything's laid out for it. Yeah, the soul says, "All right, welcome, good morning." Right? Every day it wakes up, good morning, ready to go, ready to tackle the day's activities. Let's get going. And the body's like, nope. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I want to read this. I want to do that. Let's have some cheesecake and some coffee. And cheesecake's not so bad anyway. Whatever. Not on Pesach, right? Because cheese matzah, whatever. And this and that and the other. And it's like a whole schlep. And by the time, and the soul's like, hello, let's go. We're on the clock here. What's happening? That's what we're dealing with. And that's why when Adam and Eve realize what's just happened, that their bodies have, I'm quoting Calvin and Hobbes, transmogrified from, because you have to quote Calvin and Hobbes on Sundays. That's when they had the color comics back in the day, right? Because like the big full... Anyway, so yeah, when the body transmogrifies from being a pure conduit, right? A pure conduit, a glove, a spacesuit, into its own agendaed reality, yeah, when that happens, that's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the one that realizes how that's not where they know they shouldn't be there. They know that's not where they ought to be. And that feeling of falling short is it's embarrassing. And so all they want to do is hide themselves. To the point that God says, Adam, where are you? You can't hide from me. It's funny. Adam wants to hide. The Torah tells us he hides. What are you going to do? It's a natural human response. It's like, what do I do with this thing that I know doesn't look the way it should be, and I'm embarrassed. It's what it is. It's not guilt, by the way. Guilt and shame is a different. I don't know if in English it works, but in the Hebrew it's a completely different emotion, different feeling. Again, I mentioned it quickly before. Guilt is something where I feel guilty or regret about the past. Shame is about who I am right now. Guilt is about what I've done. Shame is about who I am. It's a much deeper thing. I don't mean shame like somebody else is shaming. I mean like a feel of inner shame. Okay, moving on. So what happens with the sin? Adam and Eve are in a pure state of, in the zone, spiritual zone, divine zone, in the Garden of Eden. And then the serpent arrives on the scene. I'm not going to get into all the details, because like I mentioned, we have a course coming up called Secrets of the Bible that we're going to teach at some point, hopefully in May, maybe even online, which is going to take a super, super, super Kabbalistic deep dive into all these stories. And again, you will be blown away, just absolutely mind blown by the way these stories will be taught. But what happens is that because of the serpent and because of eating of the fruit of the tree, there's a shift. Instead of Adam and Eve feeling and knowing and being in the zone about what God wants them to do, now they're aware of self. And the most elementary way that they're aware of self is that they're aware that they wanted to eat something, or they ate something that they wanted. That constitutes moving out of the zone. Right? If the zone is being locked into what God wants and purpose, so the moment I eat what I want that God told me not to eat is the moment I'm no longer, by definition, in that zone. And so what causes Adam's downfall? Eating from the tree of knowledge, developing a taste for self that is at odds with the state of being present in spiritual purpose. And all that happened with the grape. It says that they squeezed the grapes and they drank it, according to that opinion, and that was the downfall. Fast forward hundreds of years, and now we have the next character. I told you this is happening in self-awareness in 3 acts. Okay, so hold on, before we fast forward, let me just clarify. Adam and Eve give birth in that moment to the notion of self-awareness. Prior to the sin, there was only God awareness. Post-sin, or sin and post-sin, there's now 2 realities. You could be aware of God and purpose, and you could also be aware of self. You can be thinking about what I want, what I like, how I feel, what my feel, right? You can have your own self-awareness, agenda, reality, distinct from where you're meant to be. Instead of living purely in the zone and feeling that pure flow, it's another word that's used today in this context, right? Instead of just being in the flow, you're now aware of self. And by the way, that comes with benefits. You might be thinking, well, being self-aware is very good. And you're right, there are benefits and there are detriments. They're out of the flow, out of the zone, and now self-aware. That's part 1. That's act 1. Act 2. Fast forward several hundred years. And now we have the story of the flood. You have the story now of Noah and Noah's Ark and the animals. What happens? The Torah tells us the world is corrupt. Mankind is corrupt. There's all sorts of horrific behavior happening. And God says, this is beyond repair. This can't be fixed, given the characters that we still have in this play. We gotta pull them out. Exit stage left or stage right, I'm not sure. I read recently that Broadway playwrights and actors, right, are now doing, I don't know, Instagram or social media performances, which is kind of cool. Anyway, a lot of interesting things are happening because of this new world that we're in. But anyway, I digress. Getting back to this point, so God says we're going to take out humanity and start again. Of course, Noah and his family, they're the ones that are saved. Noah builds the ark, rescues the animals, or at least a sampling of the animals, and the dinosaurs couldn't fit in, and it's a joke or not a joke. I don't know. I wasn't around, and that's what happens. The flood takes out, cleanses the world, takes out humanity, and the world repopulates. The Torah tells us very, very few details about Noah's 300 years of life post-flood. Yeah, he lived 300 years after the flood, and he was 600 years by the time the flood started. He lived a very long life. Long and exciting, well, dramatic life. People lived long then. So Noah, the Torah tells us very, very few details about Noah's life post-flood. But one of the things that the Torah is very sure to tell us is that after the flood, Noah plants a vineyard. Yeah, what happens? Unmute yourself if you know what happens.
Wine.
He plants a vineyard. He drinks wine. What happens?
He gets drunk.
Gets drunk, and what happens after that?
That with his daughters.
It's a hangover.
No. That's not Noah. That's Lot. That's a different guy. What happens? He has a hangover. What else?
I thought he had relations, but he wasn't supposed to. That's Lot?
That's Lot. Yeah.
Never.
What happens? Noah again. Noah is
Naked.
yes, yes. He takes off his clothes. He plants a vineyard. He gets drunk, and he takes off his clothes. Kind of reversing the pattern set by Adam and Eve, where they drank and put on clothes. He's drinking and taking off clothes. Of course, the Kabbalists pay very close attention to all of this. And the Kabbalists say that Noah wasn't just trying to, forget some traumatic memories. He had seen, God knows what he saw with the world being wiped out in front of his eyes and all that stuff, even though he was a hero. But you can imagine how shattered and broken he was as a human being on a psychological and emotional sense. But notwithstanding that, that's not the angle that we're going to take on this and this exploration. What is the reason why what is the significance of him drinking and taking off his clothes? So the Kabbalists explain that it's actually his goal was to do a tikkun for the sin of Adam and Eve. You know what tikkun is? Like tikkun olam. Tikkun olam means to repair the world. That's like macrocosmic change. But tikkun means repair or correction on every level. Noah was trying to do a tikkun, a repair, for the damage done by Adam and Eve. And he sought to repair it using the same tool of destruction that they had used. They had used wine. He was going to use wine. They had used wine in their downfall. And so that's Adam and Eve used. He was going to use wine in the tikkun, in the repair. Because you have to repair something where it's broken. Right? If you repair something in a different place, it's not going to fix the problem. You have to repair it. You have to go back to the core, to the root of the problem, and fix it there. So his rationale is the world is wiped out, and the world is wiped out due to just people's behavior being out of control, which is a result of everything stems from Adam and Eve's sin. So his mindset was, let me go in to that same space where sin originates and let me do a tikkun. Let me fix it and correct it and repair it right there. So he drinks wine. Let me explain. Let me explain what's going on. The mindset of Adam and Eve was, as we've explained, is they moved from being in the zone, in the God zone, being in the flow, the spiritual flow. They moved from that space of total absorption in purpose in the Garden of Eden. They moved from there and rather into a space in their own heads. What do I want? What do I need? Right? What are my desires? How do I feel? Right? Different, completely different space than feeling purpose and driven and mission. You know, when you're totally locked into an activity, let's say it's a good deed, to the point you don't even feel how tired or hungry you are, and only later, once you're done, you realize, wow, I'm exhausted or I'm hungry, but in the moment you didn't even feel it. Yeah? They weren't aware until they decided, with some help and some prodding from the serpent, again, all these details we're going to explain in that course, Secrets of the Bible, they began feeling themselves. The wine introduced into human consciousness from the inside out an awareness of self, self-awareness. What was Noah trying to do? Noah was trying to undo the self-awareness. And, for lack of a better term, he was trying to lose, I don't know, I'm trying to find a good phrase here. He was trying to completely lose his awareness. He was trying to drink to the point that he was not aware of himself. He was not aware of how he felt or what he wanted. He wanted to become inebriated to the point where he lost his head. He lost his ability to think, and he was just in the moment, whatever that was. Are you with me on this? The tikkun, the repair that Noah tried to do, was to go completely 180 degrees from where Adam and Eve had turned humanity. They had turned humanity from being in the zone, not aware of self, to being aware of self. He was trying to turn himself from being aware of self to not being aware of self, using the same tool. At a fancy dinner party, we can be very much self-aware while we're drinking. Oh, what vintage is this? 4 cups of wine Seder. My first cup is this, my second cup is that, the vintage, the year, the this, the that, the other, fine. But wine, alcohol can also be used to lose our mind, to completely become intoxicated, inebriated, and not be aware of ourselves, or really anything. Using the same tool. And that's why he takes off his clothes. Once again, he is in that pre-sin state. He returns to that pre-sin state of Adam and Eve where they were not wearing clothes and they weren't even aware of it. Adam and Eve in the beginning were not clothed and they were not ashamed. They were not aware of the notion of clothing. They were not even aware of the body. I tried to mention this before. I don't think I ever closed the loop 100%. Why didn't they wear clothes? It's not only the shame issue. They weren't even aware of a thing called body. They were only aware of soul. Body was the tool that the soul was expressing, but the body was so, I don't know, I'm going to say subordinate, but that's still not good. The body was so pure. No. The body was so in tune with the soul that they didn't even notice the body. And so Noah wanted to get back to that place, so he drank. He drank to the point where he couldn't feel. It's possible that a person who feels a lot, maybe feels, we could say, too much, would want to block that out. and not feel. And not feel. And alcohol is one way to do that. We've seen the tragedy of that. When I say the tragedy, we've seen the negative of that. But that's a tool that one might use, one might consider using, to completely block out, deaden feeling. That's what Noah was trying to do, according to Kabbalah. And in that, he felt that it would be a tikkun. It would be fixing the problem. Instead of human beings being completely aware of themselves and how they feel and all their selfishness and the body being a separate tool, drink, and that's it. No awareness, no self-awareness, just in the moment. No clothes. But this wasn't right. This wasn't right. Because after the sin, after humanity is banished from the Garden of Eden, there's no going back that way. That's not the way to get back. The way back to paradise is not through the bottle. Which takes us to Act 3. Act 3 is Abraham. Hundreds of years later, there arises a character that we know as Abraham. And who is Abraham? Abraham is somebody who was born into idolatry. His parents were steeped in idolatry. His family, extended family, neighbors, the entire world essentially, the known world then, was steeped in pagan worship. Abraham begins at a very young age to have stirrings of what they would consider heretical thoughts. When I say they, what the others would consider heretical thoughts. Abraham began having notions that all of these gods, pagan worship, this belief in paganism just was not emes, was not true. And he began developing this notion of a truth of one God. And by the way, you should know that he wasn't the first to know about God. Even in his generation, there were others that knew about God. Why is he considered to be the first Jew, so to speak, and the father of monotheism? It's not because he knew about God, but it's because of what he did with that knowledge. Because he made it his life's mission to teach others in a kind and loving way about a loving, intentional creator, which was in stark contrast to the pagan ideas and ideals of the time. So whereas paganism was all about warring, jealous, morally ugly gods vying for power and wreaking havoc upon the world and humanity, Abraham believed and taught about a loving God, a singular force in the universe that created this world intentionally and that has our best interests in mind, etc. So Abraham teaches this. And the Torah uses a very interesting phrase when it talks about Abraham's efforts to teach monotheism. It says, Vayita Eshel be'er Sheva. He planted an Eshel. It's the Hebrew word, Eshel, Aleph Shin Lamed. Or in English, maybe E-S-H-E-L. It's like Eshel. Whatever. An Eshel. However you want to spell it. He planted an Eshel in Be'er Sheva, in Israel. And that is where he did his activity. So what is this Eshel? So our sages tell us, the commentators explain, and we know this because it's our family story, right? This is about our Zaidi, right? Grandpa Avram, Abraham. Like, this is, we know what the text says, but we know what he did. What's an Eshel? An Eshel literally means an orchard. What kind of orchard? You might have guessed it. According to Kabbalah, it was, once again, a vineyard. This is a tale of 3 grapes. Well, not individual grapes, but a tale of 3 generations of, what do you call someone who does who makes wine? Vin something, right? Not Vin Diesel. That's somebody else. Vin. That was a joke. Vin. Okay, unmute yourself. I don't. If you know what it's called, let me know. Anyway, at any point in time. So, tale of 3 winemakers. So, Abraham. What is it?
Vinter, Vinter.
Oh yeah, Vinter. Yeah, yeah. Isn't there somebody also who's in publishing? Anne Vinter? Anne?
Winter.
Oh, no, that's the Yiddish way of saying it. Anne Vinter.
Yeah.
Vinter. That was a joke. That was a setup. Sorry that. All right. So moving on. So Abraham plants this eshel, this orchard, and as our sages tell us, eshel also stands in. It's a Hebrew word, but it's also an acronym for 3 Hebrew words. Eshel is 3 Hebrew letters: Aleph, Shin, Lamed. A shell. Aleph, A stands for achila, eating. The shin, a shell. The shin is shtia, which means drinking. And the lamed, a shell, the lamed at the end is for either lina, which means sleeping over, or levia, which means helping one on one's journey forward. So Abraham operated the first B&B, the first Jewish-owned bed and breakfast, where he fed people, he gave them what to drink, and he gave them a place to sleep, or he gave them something, or he escorted them on their way and their journeys, and he gave them provisions, for the rest of their trips. Either way, Abraham would welcome in visitors. And the Talmud tells us what happened. Abraham would feed people, would give them a lavish meal, and when they finished eating, they said, Abraham and Sarah, what an amazing meal. How can we ever thank you in the middle of the desert? They lived in the desert. In the middle of the desert, to have such wonderful food, it's amazing. Abraham, you're amazing. And Abraham would say, don't thank me. I didn't make all of this. Yeah, I may have prepared the food, but who gave us all of this is God. And let me tell you about God. That was his pitch. That was his opening. And so he said, don't thank me, thank God. And if the person said, all right, well then thank God, then all was cool. And if they said, no, who's God? We don't believe in God. What kind of God are you talking about? He would say, well, if you don't thank God, then I'm going to have to pull out the bill for this meal. And like if you buy stuff, when people used to travel, if you buy stuff in an airport, when airports were a thing, I'm making a joke, right? Please God, we should get back to resuming life in all of its states very soon, literally and figuratively. So, in an airport, if you want to buy something, let's say like a bottle of water, they're going to charge you like $10, $20. Why? Because they can. Because where else? You can't bring your own water in, right? That's already taken by the TSA. So you're literally at the mercy of whatever type of beverage vendors that are inside the actual airport past security. So at that point, you pay the ransom and you get your water. So Abraham would pull out a bill and say, look, you're in the middle of a desert. Where are you going to get, this, that, or the other, this lavish meal? So you have to pay a hefty fee. Or behind door number 2 is the option to thank God. You could still thank God and say a blessing to God and no bill, or I have to charge you for the meal. And they usually opted to bless God. Now, although that sounds like some sort of coercion on some level, nonetheless, as explained in the Kabbalah and Hasidic philosophy, this really was evoking a sense of a deeper truth that people, that was embedded inside of them, the inner recognition of a higher power that just had to kind of be worked out within that person, and this was a way to kind of like, get it moving within them. Either way. But Abraham, according to Kabbalah, also used wine in his meals, not to get a person inebriated, but rather as part of a good meal, which was all a part of spreading awareness about God and about purpose. And this was the true tikkun. This is the true repair for Adam and Eve's original sin. What was the repair? So Adam and Eve moved from a place of flow to a place of self-awareness. Noah tried to repair that by becoming intoxicated and losing all awareness. And Abraham said, no. Once we have awareness, that's it. That's our reality. We have awareness. We can't try to deaden or to dull our awareness. We have to have full awareness. At the same time, we have to marry, right? We have to harmonize our self-awareness with God awareness. And that's what Abraham was doing, combining good food with a little spiritual talk, which is what we usually do with Kabbalah and coffee, by the way. We have a good breakfast and a good Kabbalistic discussion. Why? Because that's how we roll, right? It's the Abrahamic model. You take care of the self, you take care of the body, and you take care of the soul. And that is the marriage. That is the marriage, that the harmony that Abraham struck, and the harmony that we are meant to struck as well. Where we don't lose self-awareness, but we utilize self-awareness. In other words, the goal is not to lose awareness. The cat's out of the bag. Noah tried that. Cat's out of the bag from Adam and Eve. And Noah tried that, and that's destructive in its own right. What Adam and Eve was destructive, but trying to go back is equally as destructive. That's why both of those stories ended in their own respective disasters. The sustainable model is recognizing where we're at, where we have self-awareness, and that's not going away. We have bodily needs, we're aware of those. We have self-conscious ideas, and we're aware of that also. And the goal is to blend it with moments of spiritual harmony. Moments in which we are carried away by the music of the divine, by the music of life, by our divine callings of purpose. So we're carried away on the one hand. At the same time, we're also aware of self and aware of what we need to work on. And that's the sustainable model. To not pretend like we don't exist, or to pretend like we don't know that we exist, but to know that we exist. Because we do. At this point, this is where we're at. We are, and we're aware of it. The goal is to marry that with God awareness, self-awareness, and God awareness, to make the two work together. So yeah, the spacesuit is going to have its moments of kicking and screaming from the mission. I don't want to. I want this. I want that. Okay. But nonetheless, we're also able to use it for the higher purpose as well. This is the sustainable model. This is the path that Abraham and Sarah set for us. And it's the path that we still follow to this very day. So, I want to take a moment to pause, because we're about to get to another form of reclaiming self-awareness based on Kabbalah. But first, now that I've concluded the tale of three characters in self-awareness and three generations, I want to check in and make sure that everyone's got this, ask any questions, and also give a few minutes of discussion and or break. If anybody wants to get up and grab a drink or something, you can do that while we take a few questions and discuss this. All right, jump right in.
Rabbi, it's Julie.
Hey, Julie.
This was really great. Deep. I love the Kabbalah.
Oh, we're just getting started. Hold on, we're just getting started. It's not over yet.
I love the Kabbalah definition of shame. Man, that is powerful. This is where I'm stuck, and this is just like a story, and it's kind of a simple place, but if I'm stuck, then I feel like I can't grab the whole thing wholeheartedly. So I'm stuck with Noah, and I'm stuck with believing that Noah thought that if he got drunk, that was a way or an entryway to repair the world. That's not sitting with me as rational. So I love your just thoughts about that.
I would say this. I think it's a great question that you're asking, but I would say it's not even Noah. It's not even Noah. It's today also. It's today also. People who feel the weight. There's a great book by Rabbi Taub. It's called God of Our Understanding. It's about addiction. from a spiritual from a spiritual perspective and a Kabbalistic perspective. And the primary point of his book is that addiction and substance abuse is very often, I mean, he would say it's not just very often, it's always. It's a person trying to fill a God-sized hole within themselves. A person who feels the angst of existence. A person who's very spiritually sensitive and feels either pain of self or pain of purpose or pain of the divine or pain of the struggle. And it's an attempt to fill the hole, that God-sized hole, with something, to make that, to essentially, to fill it with something, and or to lose the acute pain of the struggle itself. So on one level, we could say that when it came to Noah, what Noah felt so profoundly was the burden of being. The world was literally, the weight of the world was literally on his shoulders. He was the one that was called upon, he didn't ask for it, was called upon to be the hero, to save the world, and to rebuild it. That's a tremendous pain. But as Kabbalah explains, it wasn't just he was trying to, he felt pressure, and so he turned to drinking. But like I explained before, it was a little bit more subtle than that. He felt that all of the problems had started because people were too much stuck in how they felt and what they wanted and all of their personal desires. And that's what led to the downfall of humanity and the corruption of humanity. He felt if he could just forget about himself, he could stay out of trouble. If he could just forget about himself and not think about himself, he could stay out of trouble. Again, I can personally see it. I personally believe that it's something that, again, as I said, even today, I believe even today, it's a reality. But I believe it's even without a person, thinking that this is a tikkun for the Adam and Eve, even without that, Kabbalistic connection, I want to get out of my head. I want to stop feeling, because what I'm feeling I don't think is healthy. So I want to stop feeling. And so let me take the substance so that I stop feeling. That's essentially what Noah did. Noah wanted to stop feeling and stop thinking about feeling. And so he drank. And again, it wasn't the tikkun. He wanted it to be, to fix his problems, and it wasn't. It wasn't a fix. It's never the fix. It feels like it might be the fix. It might feel like it might be the fix. It's never the answer. That's the point. The story doesn't end with Act 2. It has an Act 3. Abraham has the sustainable fix, where he mixes. It doesn't have to be the wine, right? But he mixes self-awareness with God awareness. We're not angels. We're not going back to paradise. This is where we're at. How do we introduce more God awareness into our reality? But I hear you. I hear this. I hear you. I hear your question. I hear the struggle. Hopefully, some of that helped a little bit.
So he was focused on repairing himself, not necessarily.
Yeah. But but in repairing himself, it was going to fix or repair or correct or readjust from what the problem that human beings had gotten into from the beginning, from the times of Adam and Eve.
So you're saying that was his intention, that he had that mind.
That's what it says.
That second part.
It says in Kabbalah that was his intention. He was. Did he say I'm taking one for the team? I'm doing it for Adam, or did he say, like, I see where this is headed, and we're going to head down the same path again? If human beings keep on, following their desires and temptations and whatever. This is crazy. Let me drink, knock myself out, right? Drink myself silly, and that's it. Not gonna get into any trouble. Maybe that's what he was thinking. But either way, the point is that he was trying to get out of his own head, because he felt like being in our own heads is a dark place to be.
I get that part. The second part.
I understand. Your question is, did he have in mind at that moment that this is for Adam and Eve? I don't know. It says in Kabbalah. I don't have the exact quote in my. I don't have the word for word quote in my. I have to look up the source. But something along the lines of his intention was to fix that. Doesn't mean he meant to fix them. Did he mean to fix the current manifestation of it within himself? It's hard for me to say, that nuance, which one, A or B, and if there's a huge difference between the two, because if he's fixing it within himself, and that came because of that sin, then it's essentially trying to fix the sin. So I don't know if there's a huge difference between the two options, but if it's more comfortable to say he was trying to fix that within himself, let's go with that. Why not? That's okay for me. That's fine. That works also.
Okay.
Any questions or comments?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's interesting. I'm interested in the way that sort of cast around the idea of addiction in that way. Not necessarily all addiction, but I think that's really interesting. But as I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering about that it's not necessarily restricted to that, that in a way, each of us or many of us are seeking to fill, there's a sense of a void. And whether that's manifest as a quest for truth, or the question, why am I here, and so on, that there is that draws people, or it draws people towards their religion, draws people towards the work that they do or something, is trying to satisfy something.
I thought you were going to say something else. I thought, and maybe this is what you're saying, but people have many forms of addictions, right? It's not only substances. It could be, a phone, right?
So compulsive in a way.
Yeah. So like, what's this notion of you're driving and you stop at a red light and you have to look at your phone?
But I think what I was trying to do is not cast it as, because when we think about compulsion, we think about addiction as something not so good. And so I wanted to try to cast it in a way that wasn't all about an obsession or an addiction necessarily, but a quest, a more positive quest for a truth, that it could be, and not necessarily something that is picking up your phone or whatever or doodling or fiddling or substance abuse and so on, but this drive inside to try to understand or to try to do better, or or a feeling. I mean, even now, I think each individual is feeling like, what should I be doing? What can I do? What can't I do? And kind of getting lost in what what your individual problems are and how you can help and so on. So I think what I'm trying to do is generalize this a bit more into something that we may all experience, but not necessarily as a compulsion or an addiction.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I think when we throw ourselves into, like you said, like into anything, part of it is a quest to be present, to be part of, to be connected, to be fully present, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. I think that's the combining self-awareness with presence or flow or zone, whatever you want to call it. I think that's a good harmony, and that's a good thing, to be aware of self, but also aware of what's my purpose in this moment. Other questions or comments? Joy.
It just seemed to me that Adam, who through drinking, who became aware of his body, and then Noah tried to get rid of the encumbrance
Yeah.
of that spacesuit and get back to the spiritual. And Abraham found a way to meld the two and knew that he had to deal with the physical in order to reach the spiritual.
So well said. And Joy, if you were teaching this, it would still be 9:40 because you said it so perfectly and so succinctly. Amazing. 100%. Everything that you said, yes, exactly. Abraham used, in this case, wine as a tool to be aware of self. Noah Adam, right, to be aware of self. Adam to lose awareness of self, and Abraham realized that we need to harmonize. Perfectly said. Perfectly said.
Thank you.
Good. So let's talk about now using self-awareness for a positive. Right? Because we've spoken about the dangers of self-awareness, but that was for Adam. For Adam and Eve, they were in a state where there was no self-awareness, and maybe that's where they were supposed to stay. Although, not necessarily was the sin not intended. But that's another course, that's another class. But I digress. But where we are right now, and where humanity's been for a little while, right, post Adam and Eve, is that we have self-awareness, right? We have that, we have purpose, we have self-awareness, and the goal is to meld the two together. So at this point, what I'd like to do is jump into the next chapter of our text of Kabbalah and Coffee. Because the next chapter talks about self-awareness in a very powerful way and encourages us to really, really, really think about who we are and where we are, and if we're doing what we need to be doing, not just doing, but thinking about what we're doing. And that's really the theme of today's class, and how to use that for the good. I'm opening up now the PDF of our text. Let me go to the correct page. Give me a moment. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen, and you should be able to see the text pop up in just a moment. Okay. Tell me if you guys see that. Yes? Thumbs up if you see it? Thumbs up. I'm seeing thumbs up. All right. Let's see where we're at. We're up to chapter 16. We did chapter 15 last week. Okay. This is us right here. See if I can make it a little bit bigger. Perfect. All right, chapter 16. So in this entire text is really focused on the dangers of ego, and the dangers of ego in that it causes friction between human beings, fighting, friction, discord, disharmony, disunity between human beings, all justified by all sorts of things. Well, they said this, they did that, all sorts of justifications. At the core, he says, oftentimes, most often, at the core of it is ego, where simply stated, a person's ego is just rubbed the wrong way by someone else and is offended or whatever it is, but it's an ego thing. It's humanity. And number two, it undermines all sorts of positive spiritual efforts. All positive spiritual efforts could be undermined by the presence of ego, which causes discord and disunity. Because then a person's goodness is predicated on competition and fighting and tearing down someone else, and it becomes a real mess. So in chapter 16, he talks about how important it is to be self-aware. For Adam and Eve, being self-aware was not a good thing. They were not meant to be self-aware. But in a post-paradise world, in a post-Garden of Eden world, this is our reality, as Abraham knew. And our reality is the spacesuit is not always pure. And when it's not, we have to know it so that we can correct it. We can't drink ourselves into oblivion. We can't pretend like it doesn't exist. We have to know it, and know it intimately well. We have to know ourselves very, very well and very honestly. So look what he says, chapter 16. I'm going to read. Whether in coarse or subtle form, these faults, i.e., ego, discord, disharmony, disunity, feeling like someone else is your competition, trying to, besmirch them or tear them down or win, all of that stuff. Whether it's really bad or it's subtly bad, right? It's coarse or subtle form. These faults exist in each individual according to his or her own level of service. Everyone is susceptible to this. Remember, post Adam and Eve, everyone has a very strong ego. That's another way to say everything that I said before. Self-consciousness means ego also, right? Before the sin, Adam and Eve did not have a self, did not want something for themselves. The serpent introduced that. The serpent told them, no, you want to want, right? Don't you want to want? And they said, well, maybe we do. Their eyes were open. No, maybe we do want to want. And that was it. So this ego, right, exists within everybody. It's no longer outside, external in the snake. It's internal. It's inside of us. So whether in coarse or subtle form, these faults exist in each individual according to his own level of service. Some are so indiscernible. In other words, the ego, the selfishness, is so indiscernible that one is not conscious of them. They're hidden in his soul nonetheless. He may think, a person may be reading all this and studying all this, and a person may think that these concerns are not at all relevant to him, though in reality they are. Such a state of affairs he's referring to the sinas chinam, the disliking someone else because it all goes back to ego, but just not getting along with somebody. Ugh, I hate that person. I can't get along with them. I don't like them. He says that, which comes from ego, is more injurious. It's worse, it's more harmful and devastating than any single character trait that stems from the other side, sitra achra, the forces of evil. He says, trot out any negative character trait, and it's not as bad as what we're talking about. Let me continue inside. Any particular blemish is not as powerful and corrupting as a pervasive evil, nor will it necessarily lead to another negative character trait. Somebody has a temptation in a specific area, not saying it's fine, but it's in one area. But this, what we're talking about in our text over the last, half a year, what we're talking about, because we started it 6 months ago, what we're talking about in this text, this baseless hatred which is predicated on ego, that affects everything. It's not just one issue. Baseless hatred, on the other hand, is a general fault, comprising the entire realm of evil, which is characterized by division and difference. For those of you that remember from a few months ago, from the classes, we said that holiness and evil are complete opposites. Holiness is marked by unity. Holiness is defined as getting along, a cohesiveness. Whereas evil is characterized by division and discord, breaking apart. Holiness is coming together. Evil, i.e. the opposite of holiness, is splitting apart. And so the notion of baseless hatred, of not liking someone else, This is what we're talking about in chapter 16. So we're talking about in all the chapters. Not liking someone else. Yeah. You have a reason for it. But as we said before, several chapters ago, the reason is not the reason. It's really about ego. The reason is an excuse to justify why we don't like the other person. But for some reason, or whatever, that person, your ego is bothered by that person. He says this baseless hatred predicated on ego is a general fault comprising the entire realm of evil, which is characterized by division and difference. This is the source of all one's negative character traits. That's a big statement right there. It's the source of all of one's negative character traits. All of them stem from this core issue. And it is the antithesis and opponent of God's name, Havaya, which is the four-letter name of God, Yud Kei Vav Kei, as a whole, as has been mentioned above, and as will be further explained in the later chapters of this text. The name Havaya, we said, God's name Havaya, signifies unity. Yud, and then Hey, and then Vav, and then Hey, comprise the entire spectrum of the universe and all of the forces therein on many different levels. Yud is Chachma, Hey is Bina, Vav are the 6 midos, the 6 attributes, and the last Hey is Malchut. And there are other, and you could also understand this in the realm, in the 4 realms, the 4 worlds of the world of emanation, creation, formation, and action. Again, on many different levels, God's name Havaya signifies the entire spectrum of reality. And because everything is contained in the one singular name of God, it means that Havaya, God's name, is as everything is as one. Havaya signifies a complex reality that is at peace and harmony with itself and with each other, with all the other components. Havaya signifies unity within diversity, not singularity. That's easy. If there's only one, yeah, of course there's no discord. There's only one. The trick is trick in Yiddish, the accomplishment, the what's really special is when you have diversity. And even within the diversity you have unity. Yeah? If you get along with yourself, that's nice. But if you get along with your spouse, your child, your parent, your roommate, now we're talking. That's an accomplishment. Right? So diversity that manifests as unity is quite the feat. And that's what Havaya signifies, God's name. So what is the epitome of holiness of God's name? Unity within diversity. We have to read this next paragraph. I know we're a little over the time. It's 11:03. Let me continue. Whoever cares for his soul therefore, and does not want it to be immersed in klipa and evil, nor does he want to develop a bad character, but rather desires to carry out his tasks serving God as he should, refining and improving his natural character traits. I love that opening to that sentence. If you care for your soul, and you don't want to be entrenched in evil, and you don't want to be entrenched in a bad character, but rather you want to carry out your task, serving God, etc., and refining and improving your natural character traits, then he ought to examine himself carefully. For ego-driven discord, he should search time and time again, using the light of a lamp. And I have to tell you, this is Pesach. This is a Passover reference. There's a mitzvah the night before the eve of Passover to search our homes for chametz. And how do we search? La'or haner, with the light of a lamp, with the light of a candle. So he uses that language, and you look at footnote 73, Psachim, 7b, it's from the tractate Psachim, it's a Passover reference. So I love how it's a timely, he uses that phrase, it's a timely connection with, Passover, which we're celebrating right now. It says the person who really cares, who cares about truth and spirituality and character development, should search himself or herself time and time again, using the light of a lamp. What's the lamp? Quoting the verse from Proverbs, Ner Havaya Nishmat Adam, the lamp of God is the soul of man. So we should use the lamp, which is our own souls, and we should look in every nook and cranny. I love that, as we do in our homes before Passover, right? We look in every nook and cranny to find, is there a crumb of bread? Look in our every nook and cranny for ego, for all vestiges of this evil, for it will prevent him from truly serving God and refining and elevating his nature. Ego, which leads to discord, is the number one enemy. And just like on Passover, before Passover, our number one enemy is chametz, and we're on a seek, search, and destroy mission. We look for it and then get rid of it. It's the same thing in our souls, in ourselves. We're looking for ego that leads to discord and disharmony. And by the way, bread, puffed up bread, symbolizes ego. The flat matzah of Passover signifies humility. So we're looking for the evil, the ego. Not that all ego is evil, but ego that leads to fighting with someone else. That's not cool. When this evil is utterly destroyed, bottom line, and carrying to 33, when this evil is utterly destroyed, he can proceed securely on his way in the service of prayer with bittul, with true humility, thus refining his character and fulfilling Torah and mitzvos in the proper manner. So what he says here in this, I want to just bring this last sentence together. So when a person is truly introspective, as we said before, a person can tell themselves, I'm okay, I don't have this problem. He says it's in everybody, subtly. There's somebody that everybody, well, okay, not the same person, but in everyone's life, there's someone that they don't get along with, that there's a little bit of friction that's due to the ego, that's due to our own egos. In everyone's life, there's someone that we could help and repair the relationship if we let go. If we didn't let our own pride get in the way. And this is not a small thing. This is a huge thing. And what he's saying is that if we don't let it, if we don't destroy it, it's going to end up hurting us. But if we do, if we look carefully, if we look very carefully, then we will be more assured. We will be more assured to continue on the spiritual path. As he says, when this evil is destroyed, he can proceed securely to pray in a proper way, and that prayer helps refine his character, and that leads to fulfilling Torah and mitzvos in the proper manner. So it all stems from working through or pushing against the ego. All right. By the way, with ego, we don't have true self-awareness. That itself is a problem. We can't get into that right now. But ego curtails our ability to be self-aware also. Because ego distorts our picture of ourselves and the picture of the other. So it's almost like you need a little humility to really search out our own egos. But that's also a meta conversation. All right, bottom line. Let me recap what we did today. Number one, we told a tale of three vines. the story of Adam, Noah, and Abraham. Adam becoming self-aware, Noah seeking to become not self-aware, and Abraham merging self-awareness and spirituality and spiritual service, and us trying to follow not the path of Adam, not the path of Noah, but the path of Abraham, to utilize our self-awareness in the service of God and in the refinement of our own characters. And that led us directly into the 16th chapter of our text, which talks about the importance of really looking inside and really being brutally honest with ourselves and discovering which relationships in my life are not as they should because of my own ego, and recognizing it's not just a small problem, but this is the core manifestation of the other side in my life. This is the core, nothing else. Everything else is a symptom. This is the root. The root of the problem is the ego. And the root of the problem of ego is first and foremost manifest in my relationships. So when I fix my relationships, when I heal them, because I'm working against or with my own ego, I say with, I'm working to refine it, become a little bit more humble, that will tumble, that will avalanche in a good way into healing the other symptoms that ail us. Or I'm just speaking in the first person, that ail me, that ail all of us, in our own lives, in our own characters. But it starts with repairing this. Sometimes we think that relationships, it's another thing to do, another thing on the list to take care of. In this text, it's front and center because it is the epitome of this, of the evil of ego, of the evil side of ego, the negative of ego. And as we'll see in chapter 17, this once again, I'm going to highlight what I'm referring to. This is the klipa of Midian. I know it doesn't say this is the klipa of Midian. I'm saying it. This is the klipa of Midian, the evil shell that is embodied in the ancient nation called Midian, which we talked about at the beginning of our text, chapter 1 and chapter 2, and which we'll talk about now, next week in chapter 17. Just so you know, just a programming note, this discourse, this text, has 36 chapters. So we're well on our way. There's an incredible amount of material to study, and I don't want to, the philosophy shouldn't get in the way of the practical action. The practical message of this text, this entire text, including this chapter, is to repair our relationships. Starting with taking a deep breath and swallowing our pride and being the first one to reach out and make things better. Yes, we're all thinking the other one should start. The other one should be the one to reach out first because they're at fault. That's our ego talking. That's pride talking. Why should I be the one? Getting ego out of the way is how we repair relationships, and that is key to human life, to humanity. Okay, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm going to how do I do this? I'm going to stop my screen share and pull back up the Brady Bunch view, and yes, I'm looking at some messages that were sent to me privately. Thank you for all the good words and the comments and the suggestions and the ideas. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all being here with me on Sunday mornings. Notwithstanding everything that's going on and all the uncertainty that's around us, I think there's a lot of healing in these sessions that we study together, 20, 30 people strong Sunday mornings. And as you know, the intention is as long as we have internet connection, we're going to go strong and continue these classes. Also, stay tuned to your email. I don't know if that's a phrase, but look at your email as well as social media, Facebook, and check my Facebook page periodically, and In Town Jewish Academy Facebook page periodically, because soon, at some point today, I'm going to be announcing a brand new series that we're launching this week. That's very exciting. So stay tuned for that announcement for a brand new series. The way we live in a world where things are changing, minute to minute, hour to hour basis. So we're also doing that. So I don't know if it's going to be a formal email announcement or whatever. It might be just like a personal email, but look out for some announcements about new classes, and I hope you can join. So that's it for today. And Erica, I'll pass along your regards to everybody. It's really,
Thank you.
I treasure the moments that I have with all of you these mornings. So and every day. So thank you. If you want to be apprised of the entire schedule, look at intownjewishacademy.org/live. So our website with /LIVE, and that has all of our classes, and it will be updated, please God, with the new information. Okay, have a wonderful day. Enjoy Passover, and hope to see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Take care.
Shavua tov.
Shavua tov.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ari.
Pleasure.
So much.
Pleasure.